Welcome to College, the podcast. A couple things here. I'm going to tease. We have some changes coming next week, so please, giving you fair warning there, but make sure that you tune in next week. We have some really exciting, fun updates, including a name change. We got some real intro, outro music. We're just psyched to share with you all. But on today's episode, I was lucky to be joined by Kevin Murphy. Man, he is one of the top experts in the country when it comes to all things financial aid, scholarships. And we go after, we learn a little bit about Murph and his background, and he's kind of how he got involved in this industry. And then we go through some case studies. We talked about some actual families that I think are really interesting, and I think most people would be surprised of how this financial aid scholarship affordability part of the college puzzle played out for these families specifically. And I think you'll learn a lot. I think it's really interesting. So we're excited that you joined us, and enjoy. Okay, Murph, man, take 3.
Yeah.
How are we doing?
Doing good. Let's hope it's crystal clear this time.
Yeah, let's hope it works. So, all right. Well, we've had a adventurous start here. We had some, we had some good dish in the green room where we decided we're going to have a whole nother episode dedicated to that. So I'll just tease it. But today we got a special guest, our very own Kevin Murphy, otherwise known as the Murph Man, according to me. But Murph, thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So this is I've had the privilege of working with I guess I would say dozens of experts in this space, in this kind of financial aid scholarship world that we live in. And Murph, I put you right on top of that list. If I was drafting a team tomorrow, I'd draft you second. Who do you think I'd take first? If you had to guess. Me.
Oh,
Me, Murph. Yeah, I'd take me first. But yeah. So I mean, Kevin Murphy has been in this doing this for about, I don't know, 10 years now, something like that, thereabouts.
little less than that.
Okay, a little less than that, but has been working on the front lines with hundreds at least of families, maybe thousands at this point. So just has a ton of experience. Has kind of seen it all. Has worked with just about every college you've heard of. So we want to talk about some actual case studies today. I think periodically we decided it might be helpful to kind of talk through some actual families and their experiences and maybe cut through some myths. The theme of today's is going to be talking about through some cases where families that probably assumed they weren't going to get any financial aid, and that was not the case. So we'll talk through a few of those. I think it might be helpful. So we'll get into the weeds a little bit. But before we do, I want to go way back. Murph, we talked about this in the green room a little bit. I don't know a ton about your background outside of growing up in New Jersey, right? Yeah. And I know you're down the shore now. Did you grow up down there?
I grew up in the same town that I currently live in.
Okay, which is
West Long Branch. Yep.
West Long Branch. So DTS, for those of you not in the know, that's down the shore, as those Jersey folks like to call it. And okay, so you grew up in West Long Branch.
In all fairness, in New Jersey, we usually use Parkway exits. So it's like, where are you from? Exit 105.
And near exit 105?
Exit 105, yeah.
Okay, there you go. And that's on the water, right?
Yeah, we're probably like, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes from the ocean.
There you go. Yeah. And the and what siblings? You grew up with siblings?
Yep, older brother and older sister.
So you're the youngest of 3?
I'm the baby. 3. Yep.
And what's the age differential?
We're all 3 years apart. So brother's 3 years older than me. Sister's 3 years older than him.
Okay, got it. Did they treat you nice? They beat up on you? A little bit of both? How were they?
We were all really different.
Okay.
Sister was the like the athlete out of all of us. So always playing sports, all of that. My brother was more so like the kind of the nerd, like video games and things like that. And then I was somewhere in between. I was also probably out of the 3 of us, I'd say the most academic, tried the hardest in school.
Okay.
But yeah, just a very, very, we're all very, very different children, very, very different people.
Okay. Are they still around? Are they still?
Yeah. So brother he lives like 20 or 30 minutes from us. He is married. He actually just had a kid. What has it been now? A little more than a year or so.
Nice.
And my sister's actually a high school teacher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she teaches locally at Homedale High School.
There you go.
And she's in Belmar, so she's like 20 or 30 minutes from us as well. And actually this Saturday we've got her engagement party.
There you go. All right, congrats. There we go. Okay, and then so you did well, just always in school and growing up in high school. Good.
Yeah, like they had me take the SATs when I was in in middle school, and I
Wow.
think it was just something that they were doing for a few. They had like a gifted and talented program. I always tried really, really hard in school, middle school, elementary school, like rewriting things until the paper would literally rip. So, yeah, that continued. High school was a little bit different. High school was
Okay.
interesting. I switched from going to the public schools. I went to
Yeah.
public school for elementary and middle school. And that middle school is literally like a block from my house.
Okay.
And then in high school, I don't want to say I stopped caring or anything like that. I still tried really, really hard. I still did really, really well. Just
Hmm.
my family dynamic changed at the time. Parents were
Okay.
going through a divorce. A lot of things were shifting.
Okay.
So a little bit less like laser focused on school, just with all of the things that were happening.
Okay. Yeah. Well, like that's a lot to take on as a teenager, I would imagine. So, but and you went to private school. So you said you went to
Yeah,
was
yeah.
that private
Red
school
Bank
for high school?
Catholic, Red Bank Catholic for high school. That's a private school in Red Bank, New Jersey.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and then we decided, and I think for good reason, we might do a whole episode at some point about your college experience because it's a unique one.
It is.
And again, I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to tease it, but I do think it's a story worth telling at some point, just because I think it's important for people to hear that not everybody has the straight kind of traditional path, and life happens. And so I do think again, it might be helpful to hear, for some people to hear that are again going to do some version of that themselves. So that's a good teaser for us, but I would say it probably had a lot to do with your experience. Probably had a lot to do with you getting into this, I guess, career field. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. My experience, not only like how I did it the wrong way, literally all of it. I, believe it or not, didn't even tour a school except for Monmouth University, which is down the street. Every school that I had added to my school list was what my college admissions counselor told me to add. And
Hmm.
that was where we left it at. And I think my passion about how I do this with families and kind of going through this and even just how I approach it, it was all built on my experience.
Hmm.
And I will say, growing up, I did not expect to be, a financial aid expert or doing this. When I started the job, and I think my background a little bit, but I started at a financial services company and it all was all tied into this. I love this aspect because of how much of a difference we can make for families
Yeah,
and how we can help them go through the process the right way and not end up in the spot that I was necessarily in.
it's interesting because I'm similar in the sense that a lot of how I found my way here was
Yeah.
based on making all the wrong decisions when I was
Yeah.
going through it. My family was going through it, right? And it's not terribly unique, right? A lot, I think a decent amount of people on our team are like,
Mhm.
"Hey, once I kind of learned how you should be doing this, I was like, hey, I gotta make sure that I'm preaching this to the masses and helping other people avoid, the same pitfalls." So yeah, so okay, so again, more to come there, right? We buried the lead a little bit, but that's okay. It was helpful to hear to get some additional context, at least for me. So I do want to shift gears and talk about some of the things that as we've been trading notes, thinking about what case studies to go over. And why don't you pick, I don't know, at least one, start us off with one, give us some high level stats, paint the picture of this
Yeah.
family, right?
Yeah.
Kind of their avatar, and just walk us through, uh, how it played out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I want to start off with one of the examples I shared with you yesterday, where a family I worked with, they have a really high income, right? Over 400,000. I think it was 420,000. I think when you make that much money, you're just assuming you're not going to get any need-based aid, which totally, totally get it. One of the things they didn't realize is that if they're also paying for private high school, right, that actually gets factored into things at CSS profile schools, right? They'll get an allowance for that.
And just stop right there for a second,
Mhm.
because for somebody listening to this episode for the
Mhm.
first time might hear what are CSS profile schools, right? So okay, and again, so we got this family making 420,000.
Yep.
Assuming they're not going to get any financial aid, we learn a little bit more to say, I don't know, I'm not so sure about that, especially given the fact that you're sending a younger sibling to private high school, and then you can kind of pick it up there. And again, just unpack what are CSS profile colleges.
Yeah, so there's about 200, 250 CSS profile colleges, and they're typically schools that are private, expensive, even competitive schools. And the reason they use the CSS profile is because they give a lot of their own money, right? Institutional aid. So it's a more in-depth form. but it's a totally different calculation, a totally different formula than the FAFSA, right? The federal methodology. And at CSS profile schools, when you have more than one child in college at the same time, you get an allowance. But then oftentimes, if you're paying for K through 12 for private school, maybe not upfront, but on appeal, right? You'll be able to get that allowance applied as well. So it's essentially, I guess you call it a discount
Mhm.
for basically paying for education for multiple students at the same time.
Yeah, and I think it's important just to emphasize, right? Because we get this question all the time. We get this question multiple times a day. What's the income cutoff for financial aid, right? Or what's the how much savings can you have where you won't be eligible for financial aid? And it's just not that simple. Life would be easier on everybody, right? Us consumers, especially if it was just like, hey, if you make above 500,000 and you have over $1 million in savings, you're not getting financial aid. Or obviously I'm pulling those numbers from thin air, but it's just not the case, right? Like I often use in examples where I'm like, hey, we had a family that had two commas on their tax return for their adjusted gross income, i.e. making over $1 million, right? Over $1 million adjusted gross income. He got need-based financial aid at Tufts. Okay. Now, obviously, is that unique? Of course it is, right? Most families, if your income is over $1 million, you're not going to get need-based financial aid at Tufts, or anywhere else, right? But again, this was a business owner. There was all these extenuating circumstances. It was a 1-year deal, but I just like to anchor to that example, right? Because and again, you've seen other ones, 800,000, 700,000. We're still getting need-based financial aid. So the headline is, and this is something that we coach on a daily basis, don't disqualify yourself from financial aid by making these assumptions, right? And not throwing your hat in the ring. And when you don't throw your hat in the ring to be considered for discounts, guess what? You're guaranteeing you're paying full sticker price for all 4 years, right? Is there another one you wanted to hit on of those
Yeah,
few that
just
you
so
shared?
just to finish off on that one though. So like
Yeah.
when everything was said and done, I mean,
Yeah.
they ended up getting, I think it was around $30,000 in need-based grants from WPI, right? And need-based aid with 420,000 in income.
There you
You
go.
just touched on, 500, 600,000. So I'll jump to that one. But I worked with a family who had three kids in college at the same time, made $650,000. They got need-based aid from Holy Cross, from Boston University, from Emory, you name it, right? All of the schools were giving them need-based aid because they had three children in college at the same time. And again, like initial assumption, we're not going to get anything. We make way too much money, even though we have three kids in college at the same time. But I'd say with the costs of college today, you can have a really high income and really high assets and still get need-based aid. And even if you don't automatically get need-based aid on appeal, you might have had a family with the two commas in assets. We were able to get that removed on appeal because of their circumstances. And, on appeal, you might be able to get aid then, and then you also may even get some goodwill here and there. We saw that this year from Trinity, Vassar, and a few other schools where it was like, oh, the numbers don't necessarily line up, but we're still going to give you a $10,000, $20,000 grant.
Right. Throw us a bone at least, right?
Yeah.
Throw us a bone. And like, yeah, when you're staring at $100,000, 10,000 might feel like a drop in the bucket, but guess what? That's tax-free money essentially times 4 years. We're talking about 40 grand, right? And again, that's free money coming right off the top. And at the risk of sounding redundant here, in that example that Murph shared, right, of the family that had three kids in school at once, they're making whatever household income of 600, 650, still getting these meaningful need-based financial aid discounts, right? Let's be clear. These are not merit-based scholarships from the students. These are need-based discounts based on completing and submitting the financial aid applications and these colleges formulas, right? They're business models essentially. But for the vast majority of schools, let's just say that they didn't apply for financial aid freshman year or maybe sophomore year, but then junior year they said to the college, hey, we're going to apply for financial aid this year because now we have two younger kids entering college as well.
Yeah.
The vast majority of colleges will tell you, sorry, brother, you missed your chance. You didn't apply freshman year. And so you can't just kind of do a 180 now and change your mind just because you had some changes in circumstances, right? Now, some colleges are might be a little bit more lenient. We've seen it happen, but those are the exceptions rather than the rules, right? Something again, you'll always hear us say, don't give these colleges excuses to give you less money because they'll usually take you up on it. So again, very, very important that, this family kind of did the right thing by applying for financial aid freshman year, even if they just have one in school and they're not going to get anything that in discounts that first year. they can do it in subsequent years, right? But only if they've, again, thrown their hat in the ring out of the gates. Okay. Another important point, you heard Murph say a couple times that while maybe we didn't get anything initially, but we completed the financial aid applications, and on appeal, we got something. Appeal, if that's a new term for you, we're negotiating, guys. Okay. Now, it's very important, right, that we use this word appeal, because these financial aid counselors, these colleges are very finicky, I guess you could say, with their vernacular. And so if you call them up or write a letter and say, hey, I want to negotiate for X amount of more dollars, that's probably the end of the negotiation. Okay, the nomenclature that you use here matters. That's silly, but it's a fact, right? We have to use the word appeal. So Murph, that rolls off your tongue naturally. But in case some people are going, "What's appeal?" Right? That's what we're doing, right? We're saying, okay, we didn't get anything out of the gates, but we want to circle back and get a better deal than your initial offer of nothing or whatever, right? And it's something that we are always coaching families on. A, make sure you're doing it, but B, there's kind of a method to that madness. And if we haven't had a full podcast on it already, I'm sure we will. We will have plenty. So I'll kind of talk through two case studies that are almost the exact same. These are two of many, right? And you've had a lot of experience with these, but this is in these cases, there were two families that are split household families. So they are divorced parents, right? And in one case, we had a situation where the custodial parent, okay, and that is the parent that now the definition of that means the parent that provides the most financial support to the student. Okay, if you're divorced or separated, it's that parent, that household that completes the FAFSA and completes the CSS profile. Okay, and when you complete the FAFSA, if you are divorced or separated but you're remarried, that new that step parent essentially is treated like a biological parent according to the FAFSA, right? Their income goes on that form. Their assets goes on that form. In colleges that only require the FAFSA, that will be kind of the foundation for determining financial aid eligibility. Okay. Now, colleges that require the CSS profile, technically what they're called institutional methodology colleges. That's just a fancy term for saying their business model, essentially, right? Now, every college has their own model, right? We call them private businesses because they are, right? Private businesses that don't pay taxes, okay? But they can choose to run their business however they see fit, okay? Technically, and again, we're getting a little bit in the weeds here. These CSS profile institutional methodology schools, they're not supposed to look, quotes here if you're watching, air quotes here. They're not supposed to look at or consider, in most cases, step parent income and assets. Okay. But if it behooves them to do so, sometimes they will quote unquote hide behind the financial formula. They'll say, well, yeah, the CSS profile institutional methodology says this, but the FAFSA said that the family contribution was really high. So we're not going to give them any financial aid because of largely predicated on this step parent income. Okay. So we went back and this was Middlebury. Okay, we went back to Middlebury and said, wait a minute here. You guys are not supposed to count step parent income. According to your financial aid offer, it's very clear that you did. We would like to appeal based on that. And it went from 0 to something like 72,000, some just outrageous difference. Now, credit to Middlebury. They changed. They said, you're right, mea culpa, basically. And we're just going to package you based on how we should have packaged you out of the gates. But my concern here, and I know, had that family not been working with us, they never would have known to appeal based on that and say, you used the federal methodology when you're an institutional methodology school. That's not right. We'd like you to make this right. And again, they did, credit to them. But had they not known, and who does, right? If you don't do this for a living, you're overpaying by $70,000, right, a year, right? Times 40 years, essentially $300,000. Similar case, right? And again, the other example that I'm talking about here, where we had this was Boston College, the non-custodial household that is required to complete their own CSS profile. The non-custodial parent, biological parent, was remarried, right? So they on this form, they're going to ask for that step parents' income, assets, etc. Okay, but again, these types of colleges are not supposed to count it. Based on the offer, we knew that they did. We appealed, right? Negotiated based on that fact that, hey, you guys say you're an institutional methodology schools, you're using the federal methodology kind of formula here because it benefits you, it hurts us. Same deal. Boston College came back and said, you're right. It's something like $45,000 more. They made it right. Again, credit to them. But again, it makes you think, I'm sure it makes you think, Murph, like, How about all these families that just don't know to appeal based on that?
It's like you kind of have to call them out. You have to know what they should be doing and what they're doing wrong. But no, it happens all the time. I even Boston College this year, I had them not apply a sibling allowance for a lot of families. It's
There
like
you
you have
go.
to ask for a discount.
And then just expand upon that again. It might sound
Yeah.
obvious to you, but just again, for people that are all hearing this for the first time, just
Yeah, so as a CSS profile school, BC should be giving you a discount, right? It's around 35-40% of your full SAI, right, per student if you have more than one child in college at the same time. So if you have two kids in college at the same time, and I'll use round numbers to keep it simple, and your student aid index is normally 100,000, well, it's going to be 60,000 per student, right? So you could go from qualifying for nothing to qualifying for $40,000 per student. But what I saw BC do is they didn't give that discount to anyone, right? They were basically making families ask for it. And if you asked for it and you provided essentially like a tuition statement and proved it, they would then apply the discount. But it just goes to what you were saying, where you literally have to know what they should be doing and you have to call them out when they're not doing that.
that's right. Yep. It's just understanding their business model, right? That's how I look at it. It's like, okay, I'm applying to these 10 colleges. I need to be crystal clear how they do business, right? Boston College, and I mentioned Middlebury, we mentioned Tufts earlier, right? These are three schools that um, use this institutional methodology, and most colleges, as a part of that, do consider the fact that if you have more than one kid in college at once, right? And they give a break essentially for consumers, as it should be, in my opinion. But colleges that, and this is a relatively new rule, but colleges that only require the FAFSA, they don't care if you have 5 kids in college at once, right? They do not care. It is not going to give you the formula is not going to give you any type of break to account for that. So again, especially if we have twins, if we or we know we're going to have a bunch of overlapping students, we want to just make sure that we're baking that into our expectations and understanding, okay, which colleges are going to give us a benefit of the doubt, so to speak, for this, and which colleges are going to say, again, I don't care if you're sending 5 kids to my college, right? We're not going to factor that in. Now, of course, that is always something we would appeal. But we have to know at these colleges that only require the FAFSA, these federal methodology schools, it's not, kind of baked into the formula in the same way that it is at these other colleges. So again, it all just kind of comes down to understanding, how is business done at the colleges that we're applying to. And especially if we're, again, have some of these factors like other kids in school, what might make some of these colleges that appear to be out of reach financially based on their sticker prices, not necessarily the case, right?
You know what, real quick, I just want to throw something in there too. Is you mentioned that your two circumstances, non-custodial parents and step parents, but also a great example. I worked with a family this year. Mom made 500,000, dad made 150,000. But because of who they filed the forms with, even at CSS schools that looked at both parents' information like Fordham, they got a $30,000 need-based grant. Mom was the one who reached out to me originally, and the assumption was just, I make $500,000. I'm not going to get $1 of aid. But again, given her circumstances and given how we filled out the financial aid forms and how we used one parent versus the other, they were able to get literally a $30,000 grant from Fordham. And then they got another 10 on appeal. But, it's a good point that you never just assume you're not going to get any need-based aid.
You hit on something else here that's very relevant for these split household, divorce, separated families, right? And these colleges don't see a distinction between whether you've been kind of formally divorced for 10 years or you were never married or whatever, or you got, separated 6 months ago. Okay. They don't see a distinction between those two. If you're not living together and you have two separate addresses, that's kind of considered a two household family. Okay, as far as these colleges are concerned. And I mentioned it kind of in passing, but the family, the household that they want to complete the FAFSA and kind of the quote unquote main CSS profile, right, or the custodial CSS profile, is the one that provides the most financial support to the student. But I want to pause on that because most split household families have some control over that, right? And a lot of people assume, well, if I claim the student as an exemption on tax returns, I do the FAFSA. No, nothing to do with it. I make more money, I should do the FAFSA. No, nothing to do with it. It's who actually provides this most financial support to the student. That doesn't mean child support received, child support paid, right? So again, a lot of split household families that I talk to, they're usually like, I don't know who provides the most financial support to the student. It's pretty close. They pay me child support, but I pay the mortgage and I buy the groceries. And geez, I say perfect. Now see to it, be strategic that whoever is going to give you, whoever has a lower income, the lower assets is going to give you the lower SAI, student aid index, i.e. the most eligibility for need-based financial aid. Have that household provide more financial support to the student. Be smart here, right? Now, everybody's different, right? Not, sometimes it's contentious. Sometimes we don't know where the other parent is. They're not involved at all. So, obviously I'm oversimplifying here. But if you have the ability to be strategic here and just hopefully take the mindset that, hey, even if we don't, we're not the best of friends as ex-spouses, we want to try to make college as affordable as possible for our kid and for ourselves. So let's be smart about this, right? And again, I know that that's not realistic for every family dynamic, but it's a great place to come from if you can. And you can just make this, you'll be shocked, right? And especially when we talk about colleges, Murph, like Vanderbilt or U Chicago or Santa Clara. These are a couple examples of CSS profile schools, institutional methodology schools, which usually by nature of that business model means that they're going to be looking at both households and divorced or separated families. Those three, and of course they aren't the only three, are examples of schools that only look at one household, right? And are, especially Chicago and Vanderbilt, can be very generous with financial aid. So just again goes back to the individual business model, theme, I guess, right? Of understanding for the schools that we're thinking about, how is business done there? And let's proactively target ones that are going to be most beneficial for us, right?
It,
Let's see, any other examples or words of wisdom or anything that you want to
I
add or kind of, yeah.
I just thought of one when we were talking, when you just said business, and I'm like, what? One thing we didn't touch on is a lot of business owners, right? There might be a lot of money tied in the business. I was on a call last night with a client, and they have $7 million of real estate all in a business. They're going to get Pell, right? Because of how just their taxes work out and what their adjusted gross income is going to be. And Pell is a need-based grant from the federal government with a cap at $7,395. You have to qualify for it based on your student aid index. Just a little background there, and like there's tons of situations too for business owners where plan ahead. Maybe there's some losses that you can take in a given year where you could put yourself in a spot, maybe to get Pell or just maybe to get need-based aid. And again, one of the big changes this year with the FAFSA was equity in a business with fewer than 100 employees. That's going to be left off the form, right? You're not required to include that on the form. They don't ask for it. And with that, with that change just starting this fall, right, that family does not have to report any of the business value. So I just, a huge impact to business owners with this change, but also a big opportunity to plan the right way. And maybe you can shift things with your income.
Yeah, look, we should, we will do an entire episode at least on business owners because there's just a ton to talk to there. But I think it's a good, again, kind of like teaser. And the headline there is, guys, if you're a business owner, if you remember one thing, if you're a business owner and you have less than 100 employees, which is the vast majority of businesses, you're putting down a 0 on the FAFSA when they ask you about your business and business assets, et cetera. Okay, so that's the takeaway for today. Less than 100 employees. When they ask me anything about my business on the FAFSA, big fat 0, and do not second guess, and you're not being cute or dishonest or anything like that. That is how the rules are written. So just and it's an easy mistake to make, by the way, because they kind of bury in the fine print that small detail about less than 100 employees. So yeah, I think that's a great place to end it, Murph. And it is a good reminder we should set aside an episode or two just on small businesses, and maybe we will tie that in with your college experience as well. We'll see where the wind takes us, but Murph, man, really appreciate you coming on, sharing some of your knowledge, and and we'd love to have you back at some point. But thank you again, and we'll see you out there.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thanks, bye. Okay, today's episode was hosted by myself, Matt Carpenter. I was lucky to be joined by Kevin Murphy. As always, today's episode was produced and edited by our very own Eileen Campbell. If you like our podcast, if you like today's episode, please like us, share us, follow us, and above anything else, make sure you tune in next week.